Alrighty. So we are going to continue with our theme for the week, and that theme for the week is balance in our lives. And when we talk about balance, we are talking about physical balance, the ability to stay grounded and not lose our footing as we're walking and doing other activities. But we're also talking about emotional balance. We're talking about intellectual balance. We're talking about financial balance. We're talking about nutritional balance, etc., etc., etc. And we're looking at an overall balance amongst these various aspects in our lives. So recognizing that a tip of the scales or a change in the balance or tipping of the balance in any one direction over another or over all others, as can happen from time to time, will change the dynamics of everything, or has the potential to change the dynamics of everything. So what do I mean by that? I mean, if we put all of our time and effort into one area of our lives, whether it be work or physical, like working out, or family, or anything. You think of it, because every one of us has our own unique kind of makeup of what keeps us in balance, okay? I might have obviously a different balance than somebody who has 4 young children or 4 older children, what have you. So we are going to continue with the theme of the week, that being the theme of balance in our lives. And of course, when we talk about balance, we are referring to the physical balance, our ability to maintain our ground, our ability to feel comfortable in that spot where we are, and to avoid mishaps like falls or other things that occur when we're off balance. But we're also talking about emotional balance. We're talking about intellectual balance and spiritual balance. We're talking about nutritional balance and meditational balance, and basically the interaction between all of these different things. So one thing I ask you over and over again is, who is at their best physically? Who is at their best mentally or intellectually? Who is at their best spiritually or socially? Who is at their best financially? Okay? And for each one of us, it would be beneficial to figure out what of those things or any other things are most important to you in your life, so that you can establish your own state of balance, or as the body's state of balance is called, equilibrium. And when the body is in a state of equilibrium, what that means is that all of the body's functions and all of the body's systems are working well together to keep us healthy, to keep our cells and our body parts and our organs and our systems in good shape and functioning properly. So if you think about your life as a multi-dimensional body that has various components to it, okay, it is important to recognize that a balancing of the scales, or should I say an off-balancing or a tipping of the scales away from any one of these areas, could potentially affect, either positively or negatively, any one of these other areas, or multiple areas, or all of the other areas. So what do I mean by this? So if you're spending all your time on your physical well-being, yet you're stressed out of your mind. If you're spending all of your time at work and not taking any time out to spend with your family. If you are spending all your time doing blank while at the same time neglecting blank, okay? And again, this is going to be individual for each one of us. And again, in order to figure out where that balance point lies, it is important for us to do some assessment, okay? And one of the ways that I like to do this is I like to keep tabs on things. I like to track things. And this is why I speak about a journal so frequently, okay? But the idea is, until you know how you're spending your time, until you know how you're spending your energy, until you know how you're spending your money, okay? And essentially all of these things I consider to be commodities or currency, okay? And think about that. You have a certain limitation or a certain limited amount of commodities and currency that you can spend, okay? And that could be physical currency. You only have a certain amount of physical energy. You have a certain amount of emotional energy, a certain amount of intellectual energy before things start to go downhill, certain amount of financial resources, okay? And again, the idea is to ask yourself, what are those things that are important to me? First of all, what are my categories, okay? So my categories might be work life, home life, social life, financial life, okay? Those might be my categories. Those don't happen to be my categories, okay? But what I'm saying is spend a little bit of time asking yourself which portions of your life and which components of your life and which aspects of your life are the most important to you, and then ask yourself, what are the things that I need to do in order to bring each one of those up to full speed? So if you think of them as battery packs, okay? So let's say you have 5 batteries, and you could have a financial battery, you could have an emotional battery, a physical battery, an intellectual battery, and let's say a spiritual battery, okay? And again, I choose those arbitrarily. But maybe one of your batteries is completely down. Maybe one of your batteries is only at half. Maybe this battery is at 3/4. But maybe the other battery is full, yet you still spend the time that it could be charging another battery on that one battery, right? So the key is to ask yourself, A, what are my 5 batteries? Meaning, what are the 5 things that I want to spend my most time, energy, effort, currency, commodity on? And then how do I work to build up each one of those, to balance out each one of those, so that the charge on all 5 is maximum and equally balanced, okay? Food for thought. I will discuss this more later on, okay? But again, think balance. Think about your big 5. Think about how you fill each cup to the maximum without overfilling one to the neglect of the others, all right? Balance. Have a great day, everybody. Here's one other idea. Ultimate pulmonary wellness, medication, having the right doctor, taking the right medications, taking them properly, exercise, nutrition, stress management, relaxation training, prevention of infection, balance. And I would much, much rather you spend equal time or equal value of time, because some take less time than others, but give equal value to each one, and the sum of those parts will be greater than the individual parts, okay? So have a great day. Balance. Have a great one, my friends. Alrighty, so for today's question of the day, I wanted to talk about something that I get asked about all the time, usually several times per week, and that is the topic of what are acceptable vital signs. So in other words, what numbers are acceptable when it comes to your vital signs, and when is there cause for concern? Okay, so first and foremost, let's start with the fact that there are going to be variations amongst people, amongst individuals. Now, there are some people who are going to say everybody's different, okay? And I wouldn't quite take it as far as everybody is different, because otherwise there wouldn't be norms, okay? So the fact of the matter is that most people fall within a certain acceptable range of what we consider normal, Okay, now of course there are going to be circumstances that are going to impact these different variables in different individuals, but for the most part, there are accepted norms. The other thing to keep in mind is that anything I say today is general in nature. And so when it comes to you and what are your exact vital signs that are okay and that are acceptable and that should be adhered to, that is a question for your physician, okay? So let's start with what are the vital signs, okay? At Pulmonary Wellness, the vital signs that we track in people are the following: heart rate and heart rhythm, okay? So whereas heart rate is a number, heart rhythm is an EKG, okay? Heart rate is a number, heart rhythm is an EKG. That's it. Blood pressure, oxygen saturation, okay? Now, if we wanted to extend things further, we could also make a case for taking your temperature on a daily basis. So again, that you can do what I always recommend you do, which is to track changes, okay? I think it would be a good idea for most people to have a journal or a book or a chart or something where they keep tabs on their morning vital signs. So you wake up in the morning, it's just like a little weather report, okay, about your body. So let's see how things are going today. So when it comes to heart rate, you can get both your heart rate and your oxygen saturation off of one of these, which are called a pulse oximeter, okay? So a pulse oximeter is going to tell you your heart rate. It is not going to tell you your heart rhythm, and it's also going to tell you your oxygen saturation, okay? So my oxygen saturation is 96%. My heart rate is 86 beats per minute, okay, which is a little higher than normal because I'm having this chat about vital signs, okay? So let's start with heart rate. So when it comes to heart rate, the normal range for most people is between 60 and 100 beats per minute at rest, okay? 60 to 100 beats per minute at rest. If we had to say one textbook number, it would be 80 beats per minute. Now, the reason why Pulmonary Wellness wants to also use your rhythm is because there are many different ways that you can get to a certain rate. So, for example, two people can have the exact same heart rate and have a completely different rhythm. So when I'm exercising people, when I am taking responsibility for their safety and doing everything I can to keep them safe, the more information I have, the better. Okay, now recently I've seen on the market, there are these little, apps that are coming out and these little devices that are supposed to give you an EKG. I don't personally understand. I'm saying I don't understand. I'm not saying they don't. I'm just saying I don't see how two thumbs would be able to give you an EKG, taking into account and considering your atrial depolarization and your crossing across the AV node and your ventricular depolarization, et cetera, et cetera. I am researching it. I'd like to find out more information about it, but I'm not sure, okay? So in general, at rest, our heart rate should be somewhere between 60 and 100 beats per minute. Below 60 beats per minute is called bradycardia, okay? Bradycardia. Brady means slow. Cardia means related to the heart rhythm or heart rate, okay? So bradycardia is a slow rhythm. And what are some of the more common causes of a slow heart rhythm? Well, first of all, are you on a beta blocker? So patients that are on beta blockers, and these are usually the medications that end in LOL, not to say laughing out loud, but metoprolol, labetalol, atenolol, et cetera, and those are the not the trade names, okay? Those are the those are the generic names. Those are the chemical names, okay? But beta blockers will lower both your heart rate and your blood pressure, okay? So beta blockers have the ability to lower your heart rate and your blood pressure, okay? Now, often I'll see somebody whose heart rate may be in the 40s or 50s. Now, 40s is getting a little bit too low even on a beta blocker, but 50s, low 60s is a very common resting heart rate for somebody who's on a beta blocker. And then that person who's on the beta blocker will likely not go as high with exercise because that beta blocker will create a ceiling for them as far as a high heart rate goes, okay? Now, people with what we call tachycardia, or a heart rate above 100. So what are some potential causes of a high heart rate? Anxiety, caffeine, medications can also do it. So some of the beta-2 agonists, okay, the inhaled beta-2 agonists can raise your heart rate a little bit, amongst other medications, okay? When it comes to heart rate, okay, when you exercise, it is normal for your heart rate to go up commensurate with the level of exertion. So if your exertion goes up by 20%, then we expect your heart rate to go up 20% in order to increase the supply of that increased demand of the exercise, okay? Now, what's acceptable? Now, if you think about it, okay, and this is in the book, but there's a theoretical maximum heart rate, and that theoretical maximum heart rate is 220 minus your age, which means that if you're 80 years old, your theoretical maximum heart rate is 140 beats per minute. Now, most people, when they exercise, will go for a certain percentage of that max heart rate, and it may be anywhere from 50 to 85% of that max heart rate, or even higher if you're trying to train your anaerobic system. Now, at Pulmonary Wellness, okay, we will allow our patients as a absolute maximum to go up to 200 minus their age. Why is that? Okay, now this is assuming that all other things are equal, which all other things are never equal. Okay, you're never going to see two people where all things are exactly equal. Okay, but this is assuming the person doesn't have a dangerous arrhythmia. This is assuming the person doesn't have heart disease. This is assuming the person doesn't have severe aortic stenosis or a aortic aneurysm of substantial size. So the idea is, under normal circumstances, in a healthy, stable individual, we will let you go to a peak heart rate of 200 minus your age. Now, that doesn't mean we're trying to get you there. It means that that is acceptable to us at a very high level of exertion. So again, for that 80-year-old, we would let you go to a maximum of 120 beats per minute, maybe a buffer of 125. But the 40-year-old, we might let go to 160. The 50-year-old, we might let go to 150, okay? But again, this is one piece of the puzzle, and we have to take into account the other pieces of the puzzle, which are the other vital signs, meaning blood pressure and oxygen saturation, as well as everything that the patient tells us. Now, I want to talk for a moment about a concept called target heart rate. Now, for those of you that have had any type of formal exercise training, including cardiac rehab, you know that you will get a target heart rate range that will range anywhere from, let's say, as I said, 50 to 85%. It may be 75 to 85%, 75 to 90%, whatever the range is that you choose, that's the range that you are trying to get your heart rate in. We do not use a target heart rate with our pulmonary patients because it's often not a good measure of what they can and can't do, or even a good measure of hemodynamic function. Instead, what we do, recognizing the fact that people with respiratory disease are more likely going to be limited by shortness of breath and or lower extremity fatigue, we will try to do everything we can to increase the workload over time while keeping the vital signs stable. When it comes to oxygen saturation, you will hear different numbers, and I'm not sure why you hear so many different numbers as to what is acceptable, okay? The number that I use as my kind of cutoff, even though the cutoff is really 90%, okay? And this has to do with the fact that the oxyhemoglobin dissociation curve, or a fancy way of saying how the body uses oxygen, is not linear, meaning that it does not use it equally at every point along the curve. And what that means is that each percentage point is not created equal. So in other words, there's actually a greater difference between 91% and 88% with respect to how much of a change there is within the bloodstream as there is between 92% and 99%. And the reason for that is because generally the top part of the curve is flat, and then there's a big drop off, and depending on who you talk to, that drop off is typically between 90 and 88%, which is why most people use 90 and my Medicare uses 88%, okay, as a cutoff. However, to me, keeping in mind that most pulse oximeters have some degree of variability and some plus or minus with respect to accuracy, usually a plus or minus 3%. I don't want to go by 88% here and assume I'm okay, because if I just happen to be minus 3%, then I'm really at 85%, okay? As opposed to keeping it at 93% on my pulse oximeter, and then even if I am off by 3%, I am still well protected. Finally, I want to talk about blood pressure, okay? And when it comes to blood pressure, systolic blood pressure is the pressure in the arteries when the heart is contracting. Diastolic is the pressure in the arteries when the heart is relaxing or filling, okay? And in general, with our patients, and again, assuming that everything is equal, which it's not, okay, but assuming that the patient is otherwise stable, we will allow our patients to go to a peak systolic blood pressure if they are under 80 years old. So if they are under 80 years old, we will allow them to go to a peak systolic blood pressure of 200 millimeters of mercury. If they are 80 years old or more, we will allow them to go to a peak systolic blood pressure of 180 beats per minute. And again, this is assuming that the patient is otherwise stable, okay? And again, this is something that should be discussed with your individual personal physician. Another thing that I want to just talk about for a moment is what we call the RPE scale, or the rating of perceived exertion scale, or rate of perceived exertion scale. And since it was originated by somebody named Gunnar Borg, they also call it the Borg scale, okay? Now, the thing about this is that we don't always have the opportunity to get a heart rate and rhythm or to measure our blood pressure, okay? In which case, the question that I will ask you, and the reason for this is because it's found that these descriptions actually correlate very, very well with our vital signs. And you could see that this is a chart that goes from 60 to 20, okay? And there are charts that go from 0.5 to 10. And the reason why I like 60 to 20 is because if you add a 0 to it, the 6 becomes 60 and the 20 becomes 200. And this was done on 20-year-old individuals. And so if you take 60 to 200, okay, and you talk about the 220 minus your age that I said before, this correlates extremely well with level of exertion, okay? So one thing I will ask my patients as they're working out is I'll say, are you working fairly light, somewhat hard, or hard? And keeping in mind that when we work out, we want the workout to begin in the fairly light range. We want it to progress to the somewhat hard range through the majority of the workout. Towards the end, we may want it to be in the hard range. But if a workout is very light or very, very light, it's too easy for you and you need to bump up your intensity a little bit. If a workout is very hard or very, very hard, then the workout is too vigorous and you need to cool off a little bit and bring the intensity down a little bit, okay? These are general principles, okay? General principles. Do not say that Noah told me I could go to this, this, and this. I am trying to put it in perspective for you. And these are information. This is information that should be discussed with your physician based on your full medical history, asking your doctor to tell you specifically for you what is okay and what is not okay. All right? Hope that helps. Have a great day, everybody. Question of the day. Bye-bye.